Hey, what's up? Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Roll Pod, an Alabama sports podcast from Bama 247. I'm your host, Cody Goodwin. We've got the gang all here, Mike Rodak, Alex Scarborough. Mike, I got to ask, we're, 20, almost 30 hours, probably more than 30 hours into the spring portal window. Is this like Christmas for you? Like, what does this feel like?
No, it just adds to my sickness and my illness that I need to be watching Twitter to a disgusting extent. So I can only imagine.
You like that though.
Yeah, but I mean, it's nice when it closes and you don't have to worry about it anymore. I mean, for people like Matt Zenitz and Chris Hummer, like I feel bad because, like, did they sleep last night? I don't know. Like, good chance that they did it. It's like Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter when NFL free agency starts. Like, those guys must have their phone on vibrate and beeping and yelling and screaming. So whatever text from an agent comes in, you got to respond to it.
I feel like Zenitz doesn't sleep a whole lot anyway.
No. My two favorite bits with those guys, and it's not just Zenitz and Hummer, is A, when you put total stats over like 4 years and a guy had 40 receptions. Really? And B, when the guy is so low level that the photograph is like either from a random television screenshot or just like out of nowhere. It's like, how did you find a photo of a guy from FCS, St. Mary's Academy? They find a way to get the content up, though.
It is officially spring portal season. We're recording this Thursday morning, April 17th. The portal opened yesterday, April 16th. It will remain open until next Friday, April 25th, a significantly shorter portal window compared to the December portal window. It's also, that specifically applies to undergraduates. If you are a graduate player, I believe you can enter the portal at any time. About a day plus into this portal window, I think that the thing that I wanted to discuss was a whole lot of nothing, in that really nothing has really happened for Alabama one day in. Nobody has declared to leave through the portal. Nobody has also declared to join Alabama through the portal. We're only a day in, so there's still a lot of time left for people to both come and go through the portal. But I did want to kind of throw this out, and Mike, I'll let you start since this is, your holiday and the topic you love discussing the most. And you also said before we hit record, you have a lot of ideas and stuff that you wanted to discuss. But just the fact that nothing has happened yet, are we a little trigger happy here, hoping that things might have happened? Why do we think maybe nothing has happened with regards to Alabama in the spring portal window so far?
Because people love things happening. It's like the first day of NFL free agency. People want everybody to be signed and everything to be done, but it doesn't always work that way. Look, the portal opened the same day last year, April 16th. 4 scholarship players went into the portal last year. That would be a good trivia question that I'm sure neither of you could answer. And I don't know if I can answer it off the top of my head either, but it's Curtis Perry, James Brockemeyer, Peyton Woodyard, and Tony Mitchell. So the portal opened April 16th. The first one of those 4 players went into the portal April 23rd. So 7 days into the portal window last year is when the first player went in. And Brockemeyer a day later, Woodyard a couple days later, Tony Mitchell, who was probably the most obvious of all the portal players last spring for different reasons, didn't go into the portal until April 30th, which was the last day that it was open. So it was open.
Point of contention longer. The portal was open longer.
It was open 5 days longer. I mean, it was 15 days last year. It was 10 days this year. I don't know if that makes a whole lot of difference. At the end of the day, my message would be that deadline spur action. I would not get overly excited that Alabama is going to keep everybody just because one out of the first 10 days or of the 10 days of the portal, nobody's left. At the end of the day, agents still have an ability to shop players even when they're still on a team. I think we'd be all naive if we thought that didn't happen. And ultimately, you can maintain the leverage a little bit with your current team while you figure out what is available elsewhere. So I would not be shocked if some of that is happening. And so, I mean, really, it doesn't matter if you go into the portal day 1 or day 10. Like, you don't have to pick a school by the end of the portal window. I think sometimes that's a misconception people have, is like, this is the only time you can move. Like, this is the only time you can go into the portal if you're an undergraduate. You have the entire summer to pick a new school. And if you're a grad, which players on this roster that are grads, you don't really have to worry as much about this spring portal window. I think there's still the academic year that comes into play, maybe stretches a little bit longer, but it's not the end all be all. It's kind of my message. And we still have 9 more days of this. So I would be careful on that. And you even go back to the winter portal. Yes, there was a bunch of guys that either were reported to go in before, like they're planning on going to the portal. The guys that we knew about, Keanu Kood and Jaheim Otis and Nicole Beatrand, Jalil Hurley, I think was early, Prentice, Miles McVay. But then there was other guys who waited a little bit longer. I mean, Elijah Pritchett, I think, was a full week into that winter window. Sterling Dixon, Ty Lockwood, King Mack, Jeremiah Alexander, Jay Sean Ross, Amari Jefferson, Jaron Hamilton, Damon Payne, Emmanuel Henderson, Devontae Smith, Justice Haynes, Dylan Lonergan. I think all of those guys were several days into the winter portal. So I would not sit here after 24 hours and be like, oh, everything's fine. Now, are there players that maybe we thought might go into the portal who won't? Sure, of course. Have there been cryptic Instagram messages or Instagram captions about certain things? Yes. Read into that as you will. I don't know. But my message is that there's still 9 more days. And then even if a guy goes into the portal, it's not like they need to pick a school by the end of it.
Yes and no. Like that is true, but the school you want to go to, if it's worth a damn, is not going to wait for you
Right.
necessarily.
It's true.
So it's musical chairs. So yes, while you're right in general, I think for higher end players, it's not as simple as, oh, I'm just going to go in and figure it out after that. There's a
Right.
reason guys wait. They wait to find out where they're going to go before they go in.
Right. But in some agents do like to play the leverage game, where if you feel like you have leverage as a player, then you can hold out. A school loses out on a different guy that they were going after, then they fall to you or you fall to them, depending on how you look at it. And then that actually helps your leverage. I think we see a lot of that happening in basketball right now. So it's a very agent driven game. I mean, compared to 3 or 4 years ago, I think players were, and maybe their parents were the ones kind of driving the bus as far as the portal. I'm going to take a visit to this school, and it was treated like high school recruiting. This is treated more like NFL free agency, with agents much more involved now than they used to be.
The key phrase here is so far, and which has been repeated to me on a couple different occasions, that everything's quiet so far. Things are looking good so far. So far, so and so is staying. It's all couched because you don't really know. And even Kalen DeBoer alluded to that when we talked to him on Monday when I asked him about the quarterbacks and retaining all 3 of them. It's like, yeah, I feel good about it, but I'm hopeful, but I know that things happen when it comes to the portal, and you never know who's going to come along and say, I can offer you X, Y, and Z.
Some of the maybe cryptic Instagram posts or messages or things that we have seen involve, I think, a couple of players that maybe we thought could be potential portal candidates, including Austin Mack, one of the quarterbacks, including Cam Dewberry, who's in his final year of eligibility, transferred in from A&M. Looks like he's going to be more of a swing interior role on the offensive line. At least right now, this is one of the volatile things about recording a podcast during quote unquote free agency, is that things can move very quickly, right? So as of Thursday morning, it seems like, and at least what we've heard, is that they're going to stay put, which is good news for Alabama. Maybe part of this conversation needs to be, what other names are we monitoring, or other position groups that we are monitoring in terms of guys from Alabama that could enter the portal? Alex, I'll throw this to you. Just, I know that we've talked about some of the receivers, some of the guys in the Wolf room. Just what other position groups are you monitoring in terms of guys that might leave Alabama?
The obvious ones are running back and receiver, just because there are fewer spots and more guys who I think feel like they can play right away. The other ones are competitions in which there's not a clear path to playing next year. Offensive line is one where it's like, well, how does that look moving forward? There's a bunch of bodies there. There have been a bunch of guys who have played different positions. Have there been guys that kind of get lost in the mix? And it may be not even an Alabama thing and a path to playing time, as it is somebody else saying, we really need an offensive lineman. Everybody pays a premium for offensive linemen, especially in the spring, that a guy might get lured out. But no, I think your most obvious places are those skill positions at running back and receiver on the offensive side.
Mike, you got anything to add to that, or does that make a lot of sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, could be any of those. Could be somebody surprising. I mean, there's always a surprise here or there. But yeah, I mean, there's arguments to be made for 60 to 70% of the roster.
That would make people feel really good.
No,
if you're not a starter, there's an argument to be made.
Exactly. I'm not saying that 60% or 60 to 70% of the roster is leaving. I'm just saying you can make an argument for basically any guy who's not locked down as a starter on this team.
Yeah, let's just be honest about what college football is right now. Like that's a fair thing to say.
So I'm not trying to make a counterpoint here, but I do wonder, the SEC has a rule for the spring portal where you can't transfer SEC school to SEC school. Does that factor into the math? Does that make 60%, maybe 40%?
Yes. Because a lot of these guys that sign with Alabama, and I've said it on this podcast, I've said it a million times, they see themselves as SEC players. They think that's how they get to the NFL. They're not going to want to go play. All due respect to Trent Dilfer, they're not going to want to go play at UAB. All due respect to, I can't even remember the guy who coached at Notre Dame. He's the coach at Troy now. Like, they're not going to go play at Troy. They don't think that's where they belong. They think they belong in the SEC. Therefore, they're going to wait for an opportunity to play in the SEC.
But there's also the ACC and the Big 10 and the Big 12.
Is the ACC still a thing?
Yeah. No, there's like 27 schools in the ACC.
I know you know Clemson. I mean, I know you're pulling for Clemson, but
big Cade Klubnik guy, Mike Rodak is.
You'll play for Mike Gundy.
Cade Klubnik is a great, and this is neither here nor there, a great example of a guy who I think will do better in the NFL than he did in college.
That's an interesting thought. We're going to save that topic for an off-season pod. That's interesting. Those are the maybe position groups we are monitoring when it comes to outgoing, when it comes to incoming. I know Alex has really been big on the tight end train, mostly because of all the injuries that Alabama had to deal with. I think we're also of the belief that if an affordable offensive tackle or perhaps an affordable defensive tackle becomes available, maybe Alabama attempts to swing the bat. Mike, I'll throw this to you. Position groups that Alabama should be monitoring in terms of portal additions. Anything to add to those groups?
No, I mean, tight end and offensive tackle, I think ideally, yes, you bring in a starting quality tight end and a starting quality offensive tackle, but I don't know if that's realistic. Just
here's the problem. If you do that, what does Danny Lewis do? Like the trickle down effect, when you got to be so careful walking these lines that we really need a tight end. You get somebody too good, then another tight end's leaving, and you're right back to the portal.
Now, is that necessarily a bad thing?
Now, you could say you've upgraded in that case, but I think the bigger impediment is that you aren't going to outbid people for the best tight end in the market or the best offensive tackle in the market right now. That's kind of more the issue. And I think you're looking at guys you can bring in who are okay with being a backup. And that really narrows the pool. So tight end, offensive tackle, I don't know. And people seem to want interior defensive line. I just don't know if it's going to be there because I think you feel good about Edric Hill and Jeremiah Beeman. If Kelby Collins can play inside, that's 5 right there. That's as much as you're going to play. So, punter's the other one. Jack McAllister, I think his name is, who was at Washington with Kalen DeVore, went to Nebraska. Has since left Nebraska. People kind of connected that dot right away. But if we go back to the reason why we're talking about punter for Alabama, it's because the signs are not necessarily great for Blake Dowd, the incoming transfer from, the Colorado School of Mines. Kalen DeBoer mentioned on the radio 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, that they basically tried to do the same thing they did with Burnip and have him be like a rugby style punter, move him around, as DeBoer likes to say. And Dowd didn't really do that at Colorado School of Mines, which DeBoer said they knew coming in. Maybe there's a learning curve there where it hasn't really worked out so far. And I think the physical development's the other thing that Jay Nunez mentioned on the radio during A-Day, that he had to come in and really work with Dave Ballou and has found muscles that he didn't even know he had, in the words of Jay Nunez. So, it's obviously a big jump going from D2 to the SEC. So you'd expect some of that. You're also dealing with your freshman scholarship punter, Alex Espruha. Asperuhoff, who had an ACL injury, I believe, last year during high school, so he's coming back from. So whether you get him or not, it might be a while. So that's, I think, where the need for punter comes from. But going back to McAllister, by all accounts, the reason why he left Nebraska is because they changed special teams coordinators, and they went from one who was more of a traditional punter coach to a rugby style punter, and that's not McAllister's game. So if you're wanting to keep what you did with Burnup last year, and you're having an issue with that, maybe with Dowd, then I don't know if McAllister solves that unless you change your philosophy and go back to what DeBoer did with McAllister in Washington with a different special teams coordinator at that point. What does that mean?
I feel like I'm back covering the Big Ten. We're talking about high-level punting and special teams coordinators and how that impacts punters' technique. And did I even leave Iowa?
To talk about with this portal window so far. So far.
It is crazy how we've gone from a year ago, we were talking about a lot of premium positions where they needed guys, to now talking about they need a tight end and a punter and maybe a tackle. And I'm not even sold that it has to be a tackle. I think it can just be an offensive lineman, period, and get a body in there and just have the numbers. But it has changed. The structure of the roster in a good way, I think, is improved overall.
With that said, I think you can still upgrade. I think in an ideal world, if you had Phil Knight sitting in Tuscaloosa, then you'd look to upgrade at right tackle.
Go sign the UNC edge rusher who went on the portal, who's
right.
going to end up at Texas Tech or Miami or wherever and make $1 million and go to the NFL next year.
Yeah, you'd look to upgrade at running back. You'd look to upgrade at some positions where you could still say Alabama is potentially deficient. When they come out at media days with the preseason all SEC teams, I don't think Jam Miller is going to be on there. I don't think Wilkin Formby is going to be on there. I don't think a decent amount of the roster will be. So, it's not like you have a super roster. I just think you have what you're able to have, and that's good, and you have better depth, but it's not like you can be like, all right, like we're good here. Like, I don't know if that's where they are either.
Well, it's two things. It's the overall quality of the roster. I'm not calling it a super roster, but it's also an understanding of what you have versus what you expect to enter the portal, and then tagged on top of that, what you can afford in the portal. They're just, right. I know there's Jaden Ott out there. I know Nico went out there, but still the quality of guys, the most desirable guys are out of like FCS schools right now. It's not the December portal window. It just isn't. So you're going to kind of ride. If you've got decent talent at a certain position, you're more than likely just going to ride with it.
I don't know. I was told by Darinoka there's going to be some huge names going into the portal.
Yeah, he didn't learn the Josh Pate lesson from last year. Now, granted, Jaden Ott was a big one, but literally every Cal running back met Brian Harsin and said, no.
Very, very interesting to see what's going on there. Again, the spring portal is open through April 25th. That is next Friday. So the term so far is definitely going to apply for the next, 8-9 days. So we'll see if Alabama has guys that leave. We'll see if they have guys that they bring in. There's positions that we're monitoring on both sides of that coin. So something to keep in mind, even though we're only a day plus into the spring portal window. I also wanted to touch on some Alabama hoops. Transfer portal news. Well, I guess more roster management news, because there was a couple of developments over the last week. Darion Reed, former 5-star player, did enter the transfer portal. He entered last Saturday. So week-old news, but this was something that I think we expected, although I think maybe I'm speaking more for me than the rest of us here after seeing Mo Diabate and Jaron Stevenson both hit the portal. I kind of thought that maybe Darion Reed might stay. He did for a little while. Now he's in the portal. He's taking his visits over the next month. Doesn't seem like he's going to return, although the possibility is out there, as slim as it may be. And then the other part of the Alabama men's basketball news is that LeBaron Philon, started point guard, Mobile native, headed to the NBA draft. Does not seem like it's one of those I'm going to test the waters and potentially return type thing. Seems like he's gone too. Mike, I'll throw this to you. Just what do we make of those two developments as it pertains to Alabama men's basketball? And it seems it kind of sucks to lose talent like that, but also that seems to be the name of the game when it comes to basketball, portal comings and goings, roster management, that type of stuff.
Right. Not shocking in either case. I think Philon was probably more expected. Maybe you would have thought he would have kept the door open for a return, but I guess not. But even then, like, you're waiting around for him. That's the tricky part. If he did say, I'm going to go test the waters, then you're potentially waiting all the way to May 28th. Oh, Lee Corso is retiring. His final show will be August 30th.
The first game day of the year?
Yeah.
I love Lee Corso. Lee Corso's great. It was a little sad to see the last few years, especially when I was at A&M for game day last season, and just how he's struggling through it. And just like, go retire, go enjoy life in Florida, have a good time. Everybody loves you.
Yeah, he doesn't need to prove nothing to nobody, but it was there were moments during game day this year where it was a little difficult to see the age take a toll on him.
Mhm.
That was a bummer to see, but I mean, that dude's a legend. You know, I was little and I was watching game day. Like, I loved watching him put the mascot head on at the end and during his pick segment every single show. I thought,
how great was it that he got to see firsthand Indiana make the playoff and all that? Like, good for him, man. When Nick Saban joined, Pat McAfee joined, I think it's changed for the better. And they needed some fresh air in there. But yeah, shout out to Lee Corso.
Anyway, we went from LeBaron Philon to Lee Corso. I don't know if Reed was unexpected. I think maybe you would have thought after they had lost Mo D and Jaron Stevenson that frees up money or space, whatever it is, to keep Darion Reed. But look, ultimately, Alabama's not going to win those bidding wars. That's been said. That's been known. That's just the way it is. Especially like you look at the schools that are involved with Darion Reed right now. I think BYU is one of them. BYU's got money. That's just kind of how it is. And, you know, it never felt like a great fit. I think Darion Reed's a very versatile player. He can do a lot of things, but I don't know if he's like the prototypical player for this offense, for this team. You know, maybe that could have changed next year, but I don't know. Like, I don't know if it's as big of a loss as his recruiting ranking would suggest that it is. But you still have, I think, a void probably in the middle of that lineup is what I'd say. I think you feel pretty good about center because I think Aiden Sherrill showed a lot of good things last year. You feel good about Noah Williamson coming in. I don't know if that's you're not going to go in with as much certainty that you have the guy as you did with Cliff last year or you did with Bediako a couple years ago. But I think you feel good about your two options there. I think you feel good about what you have in Aiden Holloway, a healthy Latrell Wrightsell, a healthy Houston Millette, Jaleel Bethea. If those guys are healthy, you feel good about that backcourt. It's kind of in the middle right now where you're a little bit iffy. I think Taylor Bowens, you're the one guy you have right there. You have some young guys coming in like Amari Allen, London Jemison, Davion Hannah. Allen maybe has some potential to be that wing, but you need a guy who can go up and get rebounds. You need like a 6'8", 6'9" guy to play the four. You could probably use another guy you can shoot from the wing. So that's where this activity kind of leads them right now with Cedric Howard kind of being the guy to watch as far as the portal in Alabama and guy who's been around. He played at a D2 or D3 school in Washington and then went to Eastern Washington and then was at Washington State last year, 6'6" guard, which you like that length, but was injured. Had a shoulder injury he suffered in practice last November, missed the rest of the season. So kind of the prototype player is there, which is why he's on the NBA draft radar. He's like 54th right now in terms of the draft rankings on ESPN. Duke is interested in him, which is always a good sign, I guess, for your value. So, you know, you have like the shell of what you would want. You know, can you get the form? I mean, you're talking about a guy who's highest level of basketball he's really played to this point is Eastern Washington, because he hasn't really played at Washington State that much. So if you do bring him in, I think it's another guy whose potential is really high, which I'd also say is true with Bethea. Really high potential, high 5-star kid. Did not have a great year last year at Miami. Latrell Wrightsell, potential is really high, but you're wondering how he's coming back from the Achilles. You're wondering about his concussion history. Houston Millette, the potential is pretty high with his 3-point shooting, but had bad knees that kept him out last year. So it's a little bit hit or miss. Like you could be in a situation where hit. Coward has a great year. Bethea has a great year. Trelly's back. Millette's hitting on it and everything's running. You could also have a year where you have all those issues crop up again, and then you are really in a dire spot. So it's an interesting roster construction. And the other thing to worry about, or at least consider with Coward, is that if he goes through the draft process, you're not knowing for sure about him until he makes that final decision, which is probably after the combine, going as late as May 28th. So you're waiting around, and that could be a reason why, like a school like Duke might back out. So that's kind of the guy, but you need somebody else. Like I said, you need somebody in that 6'8", 6'9" range who can rebound and give you a little bit more depth at the 4 and maybe the 3 as well. That's kind of what this roster is missing. They have 10 guys right now under contract, if you will. They can fit 2 to 3 more. You're not going to play 13. I think you can have 12 guys that you throw into camp, this September and see what happens. But, it's a team that's not going to be as highly regarded going into next year. I think no matter what happens from here on out in the portal, you're not looking at a team that's number 2 in the country going into this season. I think right now they're late teens, early 20s as far as where people are ranking them. And, there's going to be a little bit more uncertainty about this Alabama team, regardless of what happens in the portal from here on out.
Last offseason, everything came up crimson. This offseason, not so much. Alex, I wanted to throw this to you because I know you had some thoughts on LeBaron Philon this past year, up and down a little bit. Are you surprised that he has fully committed to the NBA draft? I kind of thought he would test the waters and then probably return because of the inconsistent play he had up and down this year. Are you surprised that he's just fully gone?
I am. And I agree with what Mike said about Darian Reed. Status as a recruit, not necessarily matching the product that we saw on the court. I said it in a thread at some point that just like, really, if you lose him, I don't think it's the end of the world. The height issue is legitimate, though, and not having that there. But to your point on Philon, the NBA draft is not the NFL draft. Even forget rounds 2, 3, 4, 5. Doesn't even matter. If you're not an early first round pick, your leash is short in the NBA. And I just wonder the advice that LeBaron's getting versus what we're seeing on draft boards. Yes, we know the athleticism is there, the quickness. He's got pretty good height, but he's not especially tall for the position he's going to play. He wasn't a ball handler a lot this year. And it really he peaked so early and just faded. And it's just, you wonder what he could have been coming back. And I don't know that the door is completely shut, but it sounds like it is to coming back to the college game. But without Sears, how he could have developed, become more of a ball distributor, honed his shot a little bit. The NBA is not the place you go to develop. It just isn't. College is the place you develop. The NBA wants a finished product for the most part. And I just wonder, for his interest, why he did it. And yes, it hurts Alabama because I think he could have been your centerpiece. But at the end of the day, they're still guard heavy. So it's not the end of the world, especially with getting Bethea in the door. And that was my first reaction when they got Bethea from Miami was, this must mean that LeBaron's gone. Lo and behold, is what it seems to be.
And I think the other thing, too, just from Alabama's perspective, if you bring Philon back, and I know they've got Holloway, and I know they've got Trelly, and I know that Houston Millette's at the bench, and Nate's really excited about him. If you bring Philon back, you've got a guy that you can trust at the 1 to just kind of run everything. And I know that the offense and the way that the team operates is going to look a lot different next year compared to last year just because of all the personnel turnover. But just to have that guy you can trust at the 1 while everything seems to settle and, figure itself out, I feel like that's a pretty invaluable piece that they could have had. And you're right. Maybe the door isn't completely 100% shut. It just seems like it is. But I felt like that was, if nothing else, there was a part of me that kind of thought, okay, maybe Nate will put a little, not pressure, but just, hey, if we can find a way to get Philon back, we'll be in a better starting point than maybe they would be without him.
Do I wish Aiden Holloway was 3 inches taller? Yes. Do I trust him to be the 1? I kind of do. I like his game.
Yeah.
I like his quickness. I like the way he can get to the rim and kind of knife through, and he can shoot the ball. Now, maybe he's a little streaky, but he showed he can shoot the ball a hell of a lot better than they thought down at Auburn. Is it that big of a downgrade? I don't know. Based on especially what we saw in the tournament. LeBaron on the defensive side of the ball, great. On the offensive side of the ball, he looked shaky. I wanted the ball in Holloway's hands more than his on the offensive side. So if that's the case this coming year, fine by me.
Those are fair points. And I think the other thing, too, on top of all of this roster turnover, just with the success they've had the last few years, Nate and Preston Murphy do deserve a little bit of the benefit of the doubt here when it comes to all of this roster turnover and what is the team going to look like? How are they going to run? They have found a way to figure it out the last couple of years. Granted, not as much roster turnover, especially when you got guys like Mark Sears and Grant Nelson there. However, there is that element to it that it's just like, I kind of trust them to figure it out until they show me that they don't.
I'm going to ask Mike this because he's followed it more closely than I have. What's more concerning, the player turnover or the coaching staff turnover the last few years? Losing another valuable assistant.
Right. No, it's underrated because people haven't really talked about Pannone, and it just feels like they keep bringing guys in, but you can't take that for granted. So yeah, I mean, to me, it's the player turnover because ultimately you can't throw Preston Murphy out there to play. You can't throw Brian Adams out there to play. Like, you need guys out there to do it. I don't know. Like, at some point, like, you keep losing guys on your staff because they're so successful and they keep getting head coaching jobs. Like, it's tough to just continually replace that. We've seen it with Alabama historically. We've seen it when I covered the Patriots. That was always an issue with them. It's tough to maintain everything you want and coach the coaches on what to do. So unless you promote internally, which I don't know if they'll do here, you have to teach the coach your system, and then they have to teach the players that. And you're also looking at a bunch of new players that haven't been in the system. So climb that mountain every single year is got to be wearing on Nate Oates because damn, like every single year you have to interview a coach and find out what you want and then find the right guy and tell him what to do and have him 10 new players, whatever it's going to be. Like, it's tough. It's tough. And I don't blame him if he, I would say he's tired of it, but like, I'm sure this has worn him down a little bit. You have 5 coaches in the last 3 years who've gotten head coaching jobs on his staff. That's
a lot of institutional knowledge. That's a lot of brain power. And look, the players are more important, obviously, but I think that's an underrated part of this equation. That if there's a little bit of a lull, it can sort of be attributed to that because we did see it in football too. Like, Nick Saban at the end just had a lot of trouble holding on to assistants, and he voiced his frustration with that. And I think the quality of play at certain positions was a reflection on that very thing.
Brain drain, I believe, is the common phrase used for that. So, but hey, give Nate a little bit of shout out for being able to identify talent both on the court and when it comes to coaching. Because again, 5 assistants taking head coaching jobs over the last 3 seasons. Pretty impressive. Last thing I wanted to get to is kind of portal adjacent, but it was just kind of a fun thought that I had just recapping the whole Nico Iamaleava thing that I know that kind of took center stage last weekend with him and Tennessee ultimately parting ways with what felt like basically a contract standoff holdout situation, the kind of first or maybe most well-known of its kind so far in college football. I don't want to get into a bigger discussion about what it means for the future of college football, if it was a seminal moment. Just the idea of a star player holding out because of an NIL contract dispute. I'm curious, do we think there's somebody on this current Alabama roster that would do something similar, or have there been players on past Alabama rosters that we think would have done something similar? And I wanted to throw that out to you guys as kind of a fun last thing to discuss on today's show.
Yes. To both questions. You're talking about an 85-man scholarship roster.
Name names, Alex.
You're going to get apples in there that are going to be unhappy and going to want to make more money, and it happens. There were rumors about guys before the Rose Bowl holding out. Now, I know of at least one of those rumors that was pretty rampant that when you talk to guys who know, just said it made no sense. But yeah, they're going to be. And if it's not the player, I think in the case of Nico, it'll be very interesting one day to find out how much of this was him letting somebody else steer the ship or how much of it was him deciding I'm going to do this. Because it's not always the player who's going and trying to renegotiate. It's their dad, it's their handler, it's their agent, it's whatever the hell you want to call them. And that's happening all the time. We know of guys, parents reaching out to figure out what another player makes on the roster because they think their kid's better. This is the game now. And I don't know what's going to change that. And barring contracts, and every commissioner on earth thinks that they don't need to go that route, and they talk about how players, I've never met a player who wants to get taxed. Guess what? They're taxed by their NIL money. It makes no sense. But barring contracts that they can enforce, hell yeah, that's going to happen. The one unseemly part as it relates to Nico are these reports that he tried to renegotiate ahead of the bowl game.
Mm.
As bad, if that is true, as bad as it looks right now, if a kid ever genuinely holds out before a bowl game, holy cow.
Not just a bowl game, a playoff game.
Before a playoff game, that's when you start to question, well, how are you wired? Like, do you not want to compete? Like, what is this to you? But yeah, 100%. That has happened, will continue to happen. By the way, Otis left the team last year.
Right.
That's a good example. People seem to tend to forget about him. At least, I don't know. At least I do sometimes.
Cutting Mike off today.
No, that's all right. I was walking out of picking up my son from daycare the other day, and one of the other dads saw me walking in and just said, "Hey, Mike, who's the next Alabama player who's going to hold out?" Or something along those lines. Not the next one, but like which Alabama player would hold out? It was the exact question that was posed to me. And my answer was Ryan Williams. I don't think he's actually going to hold out, but I'm saying you need to have leverage. You need to have leverage to hold out. So how many Alabama players truly have that leverage? Obviously, Ryan Williams is at the top of that list. I think Keelan Russell is probably high on that list. But, there's only so many guys that would have that sort of cachet to do that. It is what it is. But, yeah, I mean, look, I agree with Alex that the administrators and the commissioners and all these people keep resisting it. And this is what – like everybody complains the NCAA got everybody into this mess. Like that's kind of what people say. And maybe that's true. It's the federal courts and the court system that really precipitated the entire system as it is right now. You state your grievance.
The courts saw what was bullshit and called bullshit.
Right.
And the NCAA dragged its feet for decades and
right.
had no plan in place for when they got called on their bullshit.
So that's what I'm getting at is there's nuance there. The reason why the NIL system, the system that it is in place with, no portal, with no waivers. What am I thinking? Like you don't have to sit out.
Yeah.
Like that whole system is because of a federal lawsuit by several attorneys general of different states that the NCAA was essentially forced into that position. But you are right that over time, the NCAA was not doing enough to be proactive. It was being too defensive. It was trying to maintain the system, the status quo. It was not being forward thinking. It was being too resistant. And that's what I see right now happening from the commissioners and the presidents and the ADs who are all resisting employee status, who are all resisting, contracts and maybe potential collective bargaining, unionization. That is the system that is going to provide stability and essentially be the equilibrium and bring about what you need to stop the madness or bring guardrails or whatever you want to call it. But there's still resistance to that. There's still lobbying on Capitol Hill to get Ted Cruz to protect them against employee status. Like they're doing exactly the things that got them into this mess before. They're just doing it further down the road and they're pushed back further and they're pushing back closer to their wall. Just let themselves get to the spot where it needs to go. This is all intermediary bullshit sometimes where they're trying to prevent something happening that needs to happen. And that's the system that's going to be the fix where players are under contract. Like in the NFL, you can't do what Nico did because you're under a contract. If you hold out, you're going to get fined hundreds of thousands of dollars a day. And there's nothing you can do about it. Was it Hassan Reddick with the Jets last year who just held out for like months? Like it doesn't lead anywhere. You can't leave. And that's a result of collective bargaining and a result of the system that's in place that was written into the CBA for the NFL. The same thing with transparency in contracts. Have all of this out there so you know what other players are getting paid. So a father of one Alabama player doesn't have to DM you to ask what the other player is making. Like it can be in a database. It can be on a website. Like all NFL contracts are on a website. You know exactly what every single player is making. You know what their bonuses are. You know what their signing bonus is. You know what their incentives are. You know every single little thing about the deal. And that provides transparency that allows agents to negotiate deals and say, this is literally what happens. I've been to the NFL Combine. Agents have a packet of papers like this that they hand to teams. And it says, this was Danny Woodhead, who was a running back for the Patriots. Here's 6 players that are comparisons to his stats. This is actually a one of the security breaches, and you get free identity monitoring. But it was like 6 other players who are comparable to Danny Woodhead, and here's what they're making, and this is what you should pay Danny Woodhead on the open market. That's how agents work. That's their job. If you don't know what the other players are making that are comparable, it hurts the players, it hurts the agents, it hurts the teams, it hurts everybody. So the fact that we're resisting transparency, and some states are literally making laws that shield what players are going to make under the House settlement behind FERPA, the Federal Privacy Act, so we can't see it. We can't make a records request on it. That's only hurting the players. It's only hurting the schools, and it's only hurting the agents. Make it transparent.
I don't know that it's
simple, but they keep resisting this because it's ridiculous. Like, you want to talk about the same things that led to this are happening again. This is exactly what's happening right now. And that's the end of my rant. And they just can't see past their own selves.
Breaking Bad fans will remember an episode called Half Measures, which the whole premise is, if you're going to do the thing, because there's bad stuff that will happen as a result of not going the full way. That is college sports in a nutshell. Everything's incremental. Oh, we don't want to go to a playoff. We don't want to go. We'll go 2 teams. We'll go 4 teams. We'll go 12 teams. We'll go 16 teams. Just, the number. Go to the number. They need to be contract employees. Be contract employees and figure out the rest instead of spending millions of dollars, instead of wasting years, instead of all this drama. Figure out what we all know the solution's actually going to be. We all know it. Just figure it out. And until then, there will eventually be an Alabama player that does it again, whether it's in public or in private. It will happen because there's no guardrail to stop it. None.
It's just they keep backing up and then turning around and trying to stop the tidal wave from coming. And then they back up a little more and they turn around and try to stop. Just ride the wave, baby. Ride the wave and go to the place where it's going to lead you. And once we're there, again, the word equilibrium is what comes to mind for me. I think you reach an equilibrium once you actually get to a system that is sustainable and stable. But you keep trying to fight it, there's going to be osmosis happening. There's going to be non-equilibrium. I'm going back to 7th grade biology class, but that's where my mind goes. Like, you need to get to a point of stability. Now, can I end the show by asking another question? Because I think it relates back to the Lee Corso conversation. If you are ESPN and you have 2 options, I would say there's only 2 options for College Game Day on August 30th for Lee Corso's final show. Your 2 options are Texas and Ohio State, with Lee Corso's first headgear pick 30 years ago, almost 29 years ago, being Ohio State, or Alabama at Florida State, with Lee Corso being a former player, a graduate of the Florida State University. Which one are you picking if you are ESPN? If you are going full circle with Lee Corso and you are bringing this to an end on August 30th, are you bringing Lee Corso back home to Tallahassee?
I got a question. Is ESPN about making money?
I was going to say, this doesn't seem like a very hard decision.
Going to Texas, Ohio State.
That could be a matchup between number 1 versus number 2.
Yeah, they'll run a nice little feature, and they'll shout out Lee, and they'll show Florida State gear, and they'll get to pick. Maybe they'll let them put the headgear on for that game, but I don't think they're going to be there, because at the end of the day, what's Florida State going to be ranked? Are they going to be ranked?
No.
How many eyeballs are going to tune in to see that as opposed to see Texas, Ohio State? It's not even comparable.
Right. And yeah, I agree. ESPN probably doesn't want to cede that ground to big noon kickoff. There's zero doubt in the world that game's on Fox, and I'm pretty sure it is. And that's obviously big noon kickoff territory. If you're sentimental about Lee Corso, bringing him back home to Tallahassee, I think would be your only other option. It's between those 2 games.
Speaking of big noon and speaking of Nico, the big loser in all this is Urban Meyer opening his mouth yet again and talking about the Nico situation and showing us how little he cares about the ethics of being a coach. And
what did he
basically
say?
Saying, good for Tennessee, but they're screwed because of it. That they basically he made the argument they should have just paid him. It's like, of course, this was your stance on it.
But on that same note, talking about Big Noon Kickoff and College Game Day, the big winner in all of this is Reese Davis. Because speaking about leverage, Reese Davis certainly was able to use some leverage of Big Noon Kickoff coming after him recently, and has since re-signed, I'm sure, to a more lucrative deal with ESPN. So there's winners and there's losers in all of this, and leverage is always a good thing.
Winners and losers in leverage. That's college football in a nutshell. Whether you're looking at the on-the-field product, the off-the-field nonsense, the transfer portal, whatever the case may be. This was a fun conversation. I didn't think that Nico question would turn into what it turned into, but I'm kind of glad it did. You guys got on a roll. That was a lot of fun.
Struck a nerve.
It did. Clearly, Mike needs to go hop in like a cold tub so that he can cool down a little bit. I think his face is still red.
Just can't see past your own selves.
Yeah.
That's all we had for today, guys. We'll circle back early next week to see if there's any more portal movement from over the weekend that we need to touch on or recap. The NFL draft is also next week, so we'll probably have a conversation about that and where the Alabama players might be going. Be sure to rate and review in the meantime, wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, even our Bama 247 YouTube page. Subscribe to Bama 247 and 24/7 Sports to get all our great coverage of the Alabama Crimson Tide. It may be quiet on the transfer portal front right now, at least at the time that we record this, but that's only so far. Things could change in a hurry, and we will be on top of everything over the next, 9+ days or so. And we don't want you guys to miss a thing. So I put a link to subscribe in the show notes. As always, we appreciate you guys for listening, and we will talk to you all again soon.